Hi there. I'm Noya Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, how many of you have heard that old saying about the grass is greener on the other side, or the grass looks greener on the other side, or is the grass greener on the other side? Well, is it really? That's what we're going to talk about today. And that's why my title is the grass really greener on the other side, or is it just a different version of your own backyard? So, first, we're going to ask, well, how did that get originated? Now, this is my opinion, and I think it's been there forever because even back in the biblical days, people were disobeying the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet anything that is thy neighbor's. Well, they were doing it all back then. Even when Moses was leading them across the desert, um, they were at each other's throats for various reasons. And then after a while, they had less and less food. So Moses was giving them rations per family for every day. And one man was trying to steal another man's rations, but Moses caught him and made him put it back. But then there was this other guy. Now, he had an eye for another man's wife. So they started just trying to see each other on the sly, so to speak. But then the man decided, well, I'll take care of your husband. And he killed him. He killed his husband and her husband and put his body in the rocks and thought, well, nobody will find this for a long, long time. But a few days later, one of the other men saw the body and he came back and told Moses, whatever his name was, the guy is up there in the rocks and he's dead. So, well, it had to be somebody there because nobody else was out there but them in the desert. So Moses called a meeting and he wanted to know who did this and why. Nobody's saying anything. But finally, the man he confessed, but he knew what the punishment was going to be. Because back then, the punishment was automatically death by stoning. He knew it, but he confessed. And so not only did it give death to him by stoning, but it also gave death to the woman because they both were adulteresses and adulterers, and he was a murderer. So they both died by stoning. So they killed a man for nothing, and then they both ended up losing their lives as well. And I say, you got to be careful what you ask for, because sometimes you just might get it. Now he did. His desire was granted. But the point about it was so short-lived. What good was it? So think about it in your own life. Is there something or someone that you're longing for that belongs to somebody else? Then you ask now, well, are you willing to pay the price? Look at the price they had to pay. A lot of times, the thing you're longing for, you don't know what that person had to pay to get what they have. But it all comes down to choices. I mean, everything we do comes down to choices, and everything we choose has consequences. Whether they're good or not, that depends on your choice. But today, I'm going to start in the book of Luke. So we're going to go to Luke. I'm going to go to chapter 12 because this is under the heading of the parable of the rich fool. And this is going to be in verse 13. So let's start there and see exactly what it meant. Now, this was Jesus And the parable, by the way, is a story. So this is a story that Jesus was telling the people. But listen to this. One of the men asked Jesus, he said, Master, speak to my brother and ask him, no, speak to my brother that he may divide the inheritance with me. Now, first of all, he must have been the youngest brother because the inheritance always goes to the oldest, and that's understandable. So he was already demonstrating jealousy, anger, and covetousness because he wanted what his brother had, and he figured, well, Jesus tell him to share it, he'll do it because he's coming. But look what happened in verse 14. He asked Jesus to do it, and Jesus said, well, man, who made me a judge over you? Jesus told him, he said, you better take heed, pay attention, and beware of covetousness. He's already covetousness. For a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. Now, he's already telling them, be careful what you ask for. It's not about what you have, how much you have, and so forth and so on. So he went on to tell the story, and he said, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. That means no matter what he planted, it grew and it grew, and he was very successful. But then the man thought to himself, he's like, well, what'll I do? Because I don't have enough room to bestow all my fruits. Now the man, I do. I got so much stuff going on. I have nowhere to put it. So now he's got this bright idea. So he says, I said to myself, I'll pull down all these barns and I'll build greater ones. So that simply means, oh, I'll just tear down these little barns now, make bigger barns and more barns. Then I'll be able to house all my fruits and all my goods. And I'll say to my soul, meaning I'll say to myself, I'll say, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Eat, drink, and be merry. So, what does that mean? That means all he was thinking about was himself. He wasn't interested in sharing with nobody. He wasn't interested in helping anybody. All he thought about was how can I make room so I can have more, 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 more. How many people always looking for more, never satisfied with what they had? So now he's all happy. He's got all this stuff stored up. He don't have to do nothing for years to come. But look at verse 20. God spoke to him and he said, thou fool, you are such a fool. This night thy soul shall be required of thee. So now he did all that, and God's telling him, this night you will die. And then who's going to get all these things? All these things that you stowed up, what will become of them now? What will become of them now? And the same thing in verse 21, it says, so is he that layeth up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. So then that's just letting them know that anybody who's worried about saving up stuff for themselves, they're not interested in anybody else. The same thing could happen to you. The same thing could happen to anyone who's not praising God, thanking God for what he has, what he's got, not sharing, none of that. He's not even giving God consideration. This man never even acknowledged God. So two things happened here. Let's see. First of all, the man, he never paid attention to what was going on, and he didn't want to share. He didn't give his brother any consider. He gave nobody any consideration, is what it amounts to. Not even God. So the younger brother, he thought the grass was greener on the other side because this brother had all the riches and all the goods and so forth and so on. But in the long run, what good was it? It was no good to the older brother because that very night he died. So the younger brother got it all anyway, just because he was the only one left. So the point is, don't base everything you have or what somebody else has on how much they have, the riches and this, that, and the other. Oh, they've got this and they've got that. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. It doesn't work like that. Because just because you have it doesn't mean you're going to keep it. And God came to him the very same night and said, this day, this night, your soul shall be gone. You're going to be gone. So he did all that for nothing. So be careful what you ask for, what you see other people have, and oh, I wish this and I wish that. You got to be careful. Now I'll give you one more example. Let's turn to chapter 15. We're still in the book of Luke, but we're going to go to chapter 15. Okay. And now we're going to go to verse I'm talking about, 11. And this is under the heading of the parable of the lost son. And that's the prodigal son. A lot of us have heard about this before, but this is another classic example. Now let's read, I'll just read the first 2 or 3 verses, 11 through 13. It says, and there was a certain man, he had 2 sons. And the younger son, he said to his father, he said, Father, give me my portion of goods that falleth to me. And he did. The father divided it and gave him his portion. Now, right in that one verse, that son wanted his inheritance now. He did not want to wait. You know, you get an inheritance when your parents die or whoever wills it to you. But he wanted his now. So, and many days after he got it, his father gave it to him. But after he got it, he gathered up all his stuff and went to a far country. And there he wasted. He wasted his substance with riotous living. His substance means everything that he had, his essentials, his money, his possessions. He just went wild because he thought he was missing something. So he spent riotous means total disorder. So he just went wild. He left the country. Why would you leave the country? He thought the grass was greener on the other side. He had everything here on the farm or wherever they had, but they had land, they had money, they had servants. But he didn't want that. He looked out there and said, I want to see what's out there. I bet they got a lot more out there. And he did. He spent his money and then look at verse 14. When he had spent it all, there became a mighty famine in the land. And he began to want for much, meaning now he don't have no job, no money, starving to death. So he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country. That means he went and looked for a job because he was starving. He didn't have nothing to eat, nowhere to go. So a man took him in, but his job was he sent him to the fields to feed the swine. So now that's his job. And look at verse 16. It says, and he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swines did eat. Now the word fain means he would fain, and to fain means that he would rejoice. Just to be eating the husk. He was just happy to eat the same thing that he was feeding to the pigs. So now he's down there feeding them, but he's also eating the same husks that they're eating. And it says, no man gave unto him. So that means, and nobody wasn't helping him. So that was his life now, feeding pigs, eating with the pigs, and that's all he had. And look at verse 17. It says, and when he came to himself, that means, what am I doing? Am I nuts? What am I doing out here like this? He's thinking, now that he's got his mind back, because he don't have no money, he don't have no shelter, he don't have no food. He's thinking, how my father's hired servants, they have plenty. They have enough to share. And here I am perishing of hunger. So he's got an idea. Now he's thinking to himself, he's saying, I know. I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and go to my father, and I'll just say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and I am not worthy to be called your son, but just make me one of your servants. Now that's desperation. That is total desperation. But he's got it in his mind what he's going to do. That's his plan. So let's go forward. So verse 20 says, and he arose, came to his father, but his father could see him afar off, way down the road coming. And his father had compassion when he saw him. He was so excited that he ran out to meet him, and he fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto his father, Father, I have sinned. I have sinned against heaven, and I have sinned against you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But look at verse 22. The father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand. Put shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf. Kill him. Let us eat and be merry. Let us eat and be merry. For my son, who was dead and is alive again, he was lost, but now he's found. And they began to be merry. Father had no grudge. Oh, he was so glad to see his son alive. He thought he had no idea where he was. No idea at all. 20. Now let's go and see. Now let's stop there for a second, because I want you to understand that this part of the chapter tells how the youngest son wanted to explore the world and live his life the way he wanted, because he thought he was really missing out on something. And he wanted to see, again, if the grass was greener on the other side. But it didn't take long for him to realize that he had made a grave mistake. Now, think to yourself again, have you ever gotten something you wanted so desperately, and then shortly thereafter, you realize that, well, it wasn't all that you imagined it was going to be, that it became more trouble or more work than it was worth? It could have been a job or a car, again, a person. I mean, how about a job? So if you got a job, oh, I wish I could be a manager, or, get a title, get a position, get more money. Okay. Then 6 months later, you're like, wow, this isn't all it's cracked up to be, because now you get a salary, but you don't get no overtime. So if you work hours over, it don't make no difference. And if somebody's not there, you got to do the work. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Now you still got the title, but now you got more work. And what about a car? I always wanted that kind of car. I'm going to have that car. You get the car, and then 4 months later, let's say you're paying $450 a month. Well, if you only got it for 5 years, you into your second year and you tired of this, I could have been doing something else with this money. You're dissatisfied. It wasn't all that. It's getting old. Now it's just another car. Doesn't mean that much to you anymore. A person. Oh yeah, look at he's a good guy and he buys her this and he gets that and she got her a new car. But see, what you got to remember is whatever it is you're wishing for or thinking you're missing out on, I want you to think about what did it cost them to get that? And what is it costing them today to keep it? Was the grass greener on the other side? Or was that just a different version of your own backyard? You might have the same thing. You're just looking at it differently and a different perspective. Okay, so now we're going to do one more. We're going to go to the second half of the same story. Now, this half is going to say, this is going to tell us about the older son's version because we got the younger son's version. Now we're going to talk about the older son's version. Let's go to verse 25. And because it said the elder son, he was mad, he was angry. He was very angry, and he asked the people in the field, "What's all this music going on? What all this is about?" And they said, "Well, thy brother has come, and thy father has killed the fatted calf because he has received him back safe and sound." But 28 says, "But he was angry, and he would not go in." He wasn't going into that party. And therefore, the father came out and entreated him. That means he begged him almost to please come in. The son was so angry, he just couldn't understand why the father wasn't angry. He couldn't see past that. He's like, I've been here all this time. And then you're not even angry after he deserted us? And he said to his father, he said, "These many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed." That means I violated no commands, no laws. I didn't transgress at any time any of the commandments. And yet you never gave me a kid. You never killed a fatted calf so I could have a merry time with my friends. But as soon as this guy comes back, after he devoured all your money, spent it all, has nothing. But when he comes back, you have a fatted calf killed. You give him this, you give him that, and he just couldn't understand that. And so the father had to explain to him. And let's look at verse. Let's see, at verse 31, because the father said to him, he said, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is yours." All that I have is yours. It was necessary. Meat means necessary. It was necessary that we should make merry and be glad. For this is thy brother who was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he's found. He had to make him understand that. So the father explained it to him. I didn't have to worry about you. I knew you were safe. You were right here with me. But your brother was out there lost. I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again, if he was dead, if he was alive. I thought he might be dead, but he was only lost. And now he's been found. And the father had to remind him again, all that I have now is yours. Because the younger brother don't get nothing else. He spent his all up. I mean, you've been beside me. I didn't have to worry about you. See, the older brother was basing everything on this party. He based everything on the party versus the fact that he already had everything he could need or ever want for the rest of his life. Now, I wonder if he would be willing to give up what he had just to go out there to see for himself if the grass was greener on the other side. I doubt it. I don't think so. But the point I'm making is you've got to be able to recognize and appreciate what you already have. And you got to always ask yourself. Now, I wonder what they had to pay. What was the price they paid to get what they have? What was the price they paid to get what they have? And you know what? If you'll do this, every time you get that little feeling of envy or jealousy or, whatever you want to call it, I'm sure you're going to have a change of heart. You've got to know what they paid. Are they still paying? And then if you would be willing to make that same sacrifice. But to get that change, we've got to go back to basics. And I tell you this all the time. You've got to read God's word, meditate on it, pray about it, and then, most importantly, you've got to do it. Now, if we remember this before we make these crazy choices, we'll save ourselves a lot of heartache. And don't ever forget, our everyday living is based on choices, the price to be paid, and the consequences. Now, there are good consequences and there are not so good consequences. But once you've made the choice, you will pay one way or the other. So you've got to take that very seriously and think about it very closely. And if you'll ask yourself those two questions, what price did they pay? Are you willing to pay that price? Are you even willing to take the chance to see if the grass is greener on the other side? Or is it just a different version of your own backyard? Now, today I'd like to share a poem that I wrote a while back, 2 years, 2022, really. And it's called Being Thankful. As I slowly open up my eyes and I take my surroundings in, I am so truly thankful to see a new day begin. There wasn't any sunshine, but I really didn't care. I just smiled and said, "Thank you, Lord, for a brand new day to share." And the next day, when I awakened, the sun was as bright as could be. And I felt like the Lord looked down and said, "Here," like he sent it directly to me. And as I lay there thinking of all the blessings he gives, I close my eyes and pray that I can live the life he wants me to live. Okay. And my closing words for today are, if you're ever wondering why God's not answering your prayer, maybe you're asking for something that he doesn't want you to have. After all, he does know what's best. And until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.